We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita.
And Ellen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about
Everything theater. I feel like we're going to need new music soon. But anyway, hi, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. And this episode is sponsored by Harbinger Theater. They're back at it with another fantastic production of The Mother Effer with the Hat, because we want to keep our PG-13 rating on the show. That's what we'll call it. The play runs until the 25th, so make sure you get your tickets. It is a collaboration between Harbinger and Albany Civic Theater, so that worked really well at Sand Lake when they did Dig. It is, the Wall Street Journal described this play as a tight, smart, and splendidly well-made, tough-minded, unromantically romantic comedy that keeps you laughing and sends you home thinking. So check it out, $15. You can get tickets at Eventbrite. They're wonderful.
Yes. Short answer. Yes. Pretty much everything that's been going on with those folks has just been over the top fabulous. Which would be a great way to get into our guest today. It's Liv Cummins, and I don't think there is anything that Liv can't do. She sings, and I'm going to be like your agent now. You've got sort of a Joni Mitchell kind of sensibility to your voice. Having heard you perform, and you've done, show tunes, and she's out there singing and comedy and teaches. And Liv, do you do windows too?
I don't do windows, and I don't clean anything very well, actually, Benita. So we've hit on a major source of non-inspiration in my life.
I had the good fortune to perform with Liv. I don't know, was it March? I think it was, with the Berserk Shears.
Yeah, I think the end of April. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is something that Liv and her partner in crime, Sandy McKnight, cooked up a few iterations of it. Sketch comedy. So how do you go from basically being a drama teacher to sketch comedy? Give us the quick 411 on this.
Wow. That's a big question. Yeah. Well, I think I've always done theater, and I've always been a singer. And so it was at Skidmore College, not far afield from our region, in fact, in our region, where I had the most amazing training as a theater major. And that's where I started to sort of like really envision my future and like passion in doing theater in all ways. So writing, directing, and I really started understanding comedy more too. There was actually a comedy troupe there that came, like professional group from the National Lampoon, that whole group came to Skidmore, and they were iterating and putting together a whole new workshop of comedy sketches. And I was like, hey, can I just work with them? Can I just like hang with them? And they were workshopping it at Skidmore, and I just like joined their effort, and I learned everything about putting together sketch, and really was surrounded by funny comedy people. And then that later got put on in different iterations. Nell Nugent was producing that. That was years ago. But anyway, then I got into musical theater more. And that's when I really decided to be like, hey, I know I love theater, but I've always done music. I've sung, I've performed, and I started writing songs really seriously. That's when I started. Joni, you hit on it, Benita. Like, how can you be uninspired by Joni and her voice and her songs, right? So she was a big influence, but I also am a huge musical theater fan, as you and I know, because we gabbed about that all night when we did our show together in April. So somehow I just started writing, wanting to write musical theater, because I felt like that like brought together all of what I do and my voice. And so I just actually the first show I ever wrote was with my then partner in crime, Sandy McKnight. And we wrote without knowing what we were doing. I just knew I wanted to make it happen. And I had, sort of started to learn, but I didn't have my full set of craft tools. But he just went with me. I'm like, Sandy, we're writing a musical. And we wrote a musical about called The Big One, which was about a group of songwriters in LA trying to make it in the midst of, so the big one was like their big dream, where they're going to make their big break. But it was also the big earthquake that was going to wipe out LA that we've all heard about, right? Like, this is the big one. So our songwriters were like racing against time to try to like get hit songs before the big earthquake came and wiped them out. So it was a comedy. Anyway, and then that's when I somehow hit it. Like, in my mind, this really changed the course of my trajectory in my education, and also led me to wanting to do musicals more seriously. I went to NYU Tisch, and I don't know how, Benita and Ellen, but I just scored like a full scholarship as a graduate assistant to NYU Tisch graduate musical theater writing program. It's a mouthful, but it's the only MFA program in writing musicals in the country. And I was like, I didn't know I was ever going to do that, or I didn't have any particular desire to go to grad school, but I was like, oh my God, how could I not do this? And since then, I've like developed all these collaborators through that. I'm really tight still with all my peers from that program. And, it's just sort of shifted everything for me. And then I started performing my own songs more, writing musicals more, it just sort of everything kind of blossomed after that. So I don't even remember what the question was, but I hope that answered it.
You brought us around the block pretty well.
Sketch comedy. Right. Okay. I can loop us back. So once I was writing and doing more theater and musical theater in general, I realized that I started seeing a pattern in my work that I didn't plan. It just started happening, which was two things. In the musicals I was creating, one, I was always wanting to do comedy and exploring more forms of comedy. So like physical hijinks, wordplay, farce and satire. And I sort of studied all the great musicals and how they did those things. At the same time, I was also studying and learning from the great sketch comedy greats. I was a huge Carol Burnett fan, all like, right. So all those great moments, Lucille Ball. And so I started to realize that I wanted to tell stories in my shows about women and women's lives, and historical women in particular who never got to share their voices, whose voices weren't heard. And I didn't plan this. It just ended up where I started having these historical women musicals. One of which, for example, is about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, about Emily Warren Roebling, who few people know of her, but she's the silent builder of the Brooklyn Bridge. The Roeblings were the engineers, but then the father, the big guy who started it, died right at the beginning of the building. And then his son, her husband, took over. And then he ended up getting severely injured. He got the bends when he went down under the caisson. This is like, hardly anyone knows, such an amazing story. And Emily, his wife, just like was brilliant and just took over. And she like dealt with the media. She dealt with the workers at the site. She had to keep the trustees being like, we're going to pull out, this bridge is never going to happen, right? This is in 1860s. And Emily just handled all these crises and gradually became an expert in engineering and architecture herself. So these stories really inspired me. And at the same time I was writing those stories and getting my musicals done and performed, Sandy, again, back to my partner in crime, and I started to want to produce like what could I do while I'm doing all these big projects? You know how it is, all of us who do theater, right? Like, you're in a project, it's hard to focus on other things or do other when you're deep in, right? So, but in writing, I could have these periods where I was like in development or in workshop, but then I wouldn't get to do any of my own work during, perform and other things. So Sandy and I created that show, Berserkshires, Benita, that you were in years ago. It was called Saturday Night Leave, and it hosted by me, which is why Sandy's the wordplay guy, the punster. And our
We
whole
should also
goal,
put out he's more than just your partner in crime. He put a ring on it too.
yes, that is true. Actually, I'm wearing it right now as
Yeah.
proof, Anita. Yes, true. There's a lot of crimes that can be committed in that partnership as well, but fortunately we have all fun ones. But we yeah, so we started this whole sketch comedy variety show because we wanted people like you know, Ellen and Benita, you're perfect examples. We'd meet and interact with these amazing talents, but many of them didn't have necessarily like obvious places for their work. For example, like physical comics, they'd have like 5-minute character bits and they wouldn't be able to do their, maybe they were doing like once a year, you know, in Edinburgh or whatever. And we were like, you're amazing, we should have a show that where any performer who's amazing could perform, a juggler, a trapeze artist, you know, a stand-up comic, a vocalist, a family of kids who, you know, dance together, whatever. And then we would write the sketches, and Sandy's been the head writer and is the head comedy writer on the show for years. And then, you know, I get to perform, sing, write, and do comedy. And it's like a way for me to get to do my work in like easily, you know, formable chunks, if you will, whereas my musicals are so much bigger and deeper and take longer. And so it's like different muscles that I have that I get to exercise. So that's a fun, I mean, I'm really blessed that I get to do all this fun stuff.
Yes, you
How does-
are.
And how's that network come together? Is that an open call audition of we're putting this together? What are your talents? And then you write it and put it together from there? Or how does that work?
That's a great question, Ellen. Well, a lot like how we knew, I mean, we just sort of end up knowing people. Like we knew about Benita for years and we had seen Benita's stand-up work, which I told her that night, and you know, knew about you know, all these other great people. So a lot of it is just like we see people and then we reach out and we're like, hey, you're great, do you want to do this show? But then at the same time, a lot of people reach out to us and know that we do the show. And so we do, sometimes we have like audition periods when we need new cast members, but a lot of times we've worked with the same, like Benita, some of the cast members, you know, that we worked with you that night, Andrew Jaffe, Wanda Houston. I mean, these are like regulars because they're, we, you know, we just work with them all the time because they're great. And then others we kind of rotate in and out also as your schedules permit, right? So actors always have changing schedules. So we can do the show. We're kind of a nomadic tribe. So we do the show, you know, anywhere and anytime.
I was supposed to do a week earlier or 2 weeks. I don't even recall now. And my schedule got crazy with something else we were doing. So we
Yep.
moved. And, you know, I've got to be honest, you know, we're driving over. I said to my husband, I'm not really sure about all this. They sound like a lot of fun. So let's just give it a whirl, you know. And my partner in crime is, you know, pretty game also. And we got there and, you know, just the energy was fabulous. And once you're there, you want to come back and you understand why the audience comes back. Have to point something out that's interesting. I'm a trustee over at Russell Sage College, and there is a women's institute, and they did this a musical about the suffragette movement. And I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I got other things going on. Come to find out, Liv, that was your show.
I know. Benita, you don't know how broken my heart was when I realized that we just met and worked together like 2 weeks after we had just done our show, our new musical there at Sage. And like, we have this love and connection with Sage. And yeah, I am like, so to me, this is like my big baby right now, this show about women's suffrage. It's called Ladies, How Dare You? And hopefully the title will inspire people to understand a little bit of the story we're telling. But, you know, it's historical. It's set in 1913, and this socialite kind of a elite Boston wealthy woman hires an immigrant, hardscrabble Polish Jewish immigrant who's from New York City, who's a hat maker. She hires her to go with her on this road trip, if you will, and to kind of manage her props and costumes for this pageant they're going to put on at the biggest women's suffrage demonstration of the time in DC. And this is real. In 1913, that was the biggest demonstration, where this is all factually based. And there was unbelievably, speaking of the relevance of theater and everything theater, right? To really wake up, you know, society and like poke fun at cultural change and point it up. in the demonstration, the pinnacle of that suffrage march, the climactic moment of the march was a theatrical pageant. We didn't make this up. We just wrote so in our show, our main character, the Boston wealthy socialite, she envisions herself like a director and a performer. So she's like, we're going to put on a pageant and we're going to go to the march and we're going to put it on. And she just enlists people to go with her. I think Auntie Mame, she's has these grandiose ideas. Meanwhile, our hardscrabble immigrant character, like the only way in real, this is really true, that immigrants could really afford to be a part of the larger suffrage movement at the time was if they were hired by wealthy elites, who could afford to they didn't have to work, right? So the socialites could bring on people like our main character to be part of the movement. But if they didn't, they often couldn't, they were like working, in the factories and in the, doing their labor union work. Our main character, our immigrant character is based on a real labor woman who was an activist in the labor movement. And she started a whole women's activist around workers' rights in factories. So this is like really exciting to me but we tell the tale. And again, it's a comedy, right? Like I love comedy. So it just turns into this farce. They hit the road together, these two women who are totally opposite and don't necessarily think the same way, but they just believe in women's suffrage. And they get waylaid. The horse runs off of their carriage. The driver gets drunk. And suddenly they have to rely on the kindness of strangers in this small town. And it's 1913, right? There's hardly any roads, right? Like once you get away from the main cities. And so all of a sudden hilarity ensues as the townspeople get wrapped up in these crazy women suffragists, and the suffragists come to understand the people of the town and what their lives are like. And sort of everyone's lives are kind of transformed through this weird farce while we're waiting for the carriage to be repaired and for them to get back on the road. So that's Ladies, How Dare You. And now, like Benita said, we just did it at Sage for the first time in April. And now we learned about the second act, but audiences, specifically Sage alums, Benita, I have to tell you, speaking of Sage, I was so moved. Audiences came and were really gripped by the message and meaning of the show and really like pulled into the world that we were showing of these women. And scarily enough, it's timely. It is timely, right? It shouldn't be timely, right? Like we shouldn't be still fighting these wars over and over again. But the women who came who were alums, this one woman came who was an alum from like the 60s. I mean, I forget, maybe even earlier. And she came up to us and said, I can't believe the message of this show. I wish I had seen this show when I was in high school. She said, I wish I could have envisioned how my life could have been different. I mean, it was like, it was just so moving.
Isn't that what theater is supposed to be?
When I saw the title of your podcast, Everything Theater, that's really what it means to me. That's what I'm passionate about it's fun. It's exciting, as we know who do theater, right? Like we're theater artists, but in the end, we're trying to use our work to make change happen. Right. So and to me, imagine these suffragists, the way they were doing it in a demonstration to get suffrage was a pageant, a theatrical pageant. So they knew the power of costume, of music, of lights, and they had 100+ people in this pageant. And they did it on the Treasury steps. They marched all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue. Think the Women's March, right? What do we think of the Women's Marches in DC of late, right? Especially right after Trump was elected. Was when I first heard this story, I was like, I just could envision the nasty women, right? At the Trump rallies. And that's who these women were, except they were over 100 years plus, ahead of their time, and also would probably be aghast at the things that we're still fighting for.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry to go on and on about that, but I get really excited.
Yeah. Where do you find these great stories? I mean, you try to focus on historical women. Is this just kind of doing research? Do what do you do to find these great stories?
Well, you know what? This kind of goes back a little bit to Benita was referencing earlier, that I teach at Lesley University. I teach drama and creative writing and literature. and just history and reading history, and in particular, has always been a passion of mine. And so I tend to just be around, being in that world of students and academics. I'm always finding new work to bring in. What can I use in my comedy class this week? What can I use in my lit class that's like a new play or a new work? And so I'm like, sort of always on the hunt and reading through stories in women's lives. And I see my academic scholarly, colleagues like present their work. And many of the historian colleagues in my department, I'm in humanities, research a lot of women's lives, and our work really intersects in different ways. They don't do theater, but we're talking about women's lives. And so in this case for ladies, I actually got inspired. One of my colleagues is a medievalist, and she was writing about women's suffragists using medieval imagery, much in the way, embarrassingly, that white supremacists, if we notice, have been using some of that medieval imagery in their, in the marches they do, and they sort of co-opt that, the sword and shield. Women's suffragists were doing that at the time as well, in order to say, we're fighting this battle, right? We're going to fight this battle. But when they donned these costumes and robes and sort of, sword and shield, it was like a way that people of the time could not feel threatened. It wasn't like real military garb. It was a really kind of brilliant strategy of saying, like, we're in the fight, but it was like kind of, acceptable. It wasn't scary. And so it was a way for them to use that imagery in a positive way toward promoting positive change. So I found that fascinating. I didn't know that the suffragists had done that. So in her book about this, I went and then got down this road of the ladies in our show.
This is such an education. We're going to take a quick pause here because we've got a fabulous sponsor for the show this week, Ellen.
That's right. So go make sure you see Harbinger Theater's production of The Mother Effer with the Hat. It's directed by Brian Sheldon of Sand Lake fame, and featuring an amazing cast. It is running until the 25th. It's only $15. They really talking about shows that you talk about afterwards. Harbinger always has shows that you get in the car and on the way home you talk about, the themes, and
Yeah.
This is one that's going to do that for you. So you'll go check it out.
And it's being performed where, Ellen?
Oh, at Albany Civic Theater.
Just double checking.
Yeah.
Liv, have you been over there to see a show at Albany Civic?
Yes, I have. Not for a while now. I'm actually living in the Berkshires, but it's not that far, as you know. It's only a hop, skip, and a jump. But they do great work. Everything I've seen there has been great. And I have to say, I love the title of that show, so I'm already putting it in my calendar since I heard the title.
You've got another musical. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that one would think would make for a musical, but everything, I suppose, is Vanishing Point. And there's a little flavor of the music from Ragtime I found in the score, because it's set in that time. And it's about three very famous women who disappeared, one never to be found again, Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, that's it. I'm so excited that you asked about that show, Benita. I've been really grateful that show has been kind of the biggest hit of my catalog of shows. I've had so many productions of that across the country and the world. Even in Madrid, Spain, there was a Spanish translation of that show. And I think it's because, like, the story just really resonates with people. It's like you said, of the three women of the 20s, Amelia Earhart, they all vanished in real life. Amelia, as you said, never returned, but Agatha Christie is the other one, and she vanished for 2 weeks in 1926. And her reappearance to her life and her world was never fully explained. And the third woman, Amy Semple McPherson, also vanished for 2 weeks in the same year, 1926, that Agatha's vanishing occurred. And she was one that most people maybe don't know, unlike Amelia and Agatha. Amy was the first kind of televangelist, if you will, or radio evangelist, we take her very seriously as a healer and a religious person who felt she had a calling to heal people, and she actually started her own temple called Angela's Temple, and her own religion became extremely famous. And she did these things called illustrated sermons, talk about using theater to capture the imagination. Her illustrated sermons had music and 100 people choirs and animals. She would get camels and costumes, and to her, she was really doing a show to try to translate her energy and love for the Lord to people that came to her temple. And these were transmitted all across Canada and all over at the time, the western part of the United States up into Canada. This is in the 20s, right? So these three women really vanished. And we asked the question in our show, why did they vanish? What happened to them between their work life, all the pressures and challenges they faced as famous women? Imagine being that famous at that time period as a woman. Not just, now, imagine we might face similar things now, but in the 20s, it was like unheard of. So they had to, face personal challenges, promoting their next work, trying to be, keep trying to make the right money and not be worked. Overwork was a big problem at the time. And we show how they vanished. And then in the second act, we ask the question, what if they vanished to the same place at the same time? What would they do and say to each other? What would they learn from each other? Why would they need each other to get back to their lives? And because they were so different, and yet they were very similar. So the whole show, it's a 3-woman show too, which is also excitingly theatrical to me. And it's very funny too. But you're right, Benita, I love that comparison of the show's music to ragtime. It does have that feel. And we just, it's exciting to see these women interact. And then Amelia, in our show, as we know, Amelia never returned, but we imagine like she flies on eternally, because her love, her passion was flying. So in our show, she never has to stop flying. But Amelia and Amy go back, and they develop this whole kind of fake story. Our show says that Agatha is going to write them a new story for their lives. And Agatha clacks it out on her little typewriter. That's in the show. And it's just a really fun but moving show, again, about these women's lives that we may not understand fully.
Liv, I feel like I'm going to do so much reading after this episode. Like, you just introduced me to so many cool stories that I want to know more about.
There will be a quiz at the end of this podcast, Ellen and Benita. So
if you want the continuing ed credits, you have to take the survey and pass with a grade of 75 or better.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Yeah, I like that.
In my other life, right?
Right.
So writer, director, singer, what, I don't want to make it Sophie's choice, but if you could do just one, only one, what would it be?
Wow, that's so tough, Benita. Yeah, wow. I'm really flummoxed.
You're not going to play.
I'm not going to play that game. Yeah, I reject the notion that I have to choose one. Yeah. You know what? Because interestingly, I feel like my singing and performing informs my writing, and vice versa. And my directing, like, I wouldn't know how to direct if I hadn't sort of been an actor. And I'm sure both of you have had this experience, right? When you do all those roles, you end up being better when you jump into the other one, because you can now completely empathize and you've had those experiences. I will say the one thing I've never done is make a movie, which Sandy has just done. And I just want to highlight that, because it's the kind of the biggest role. I've had a few minor roles, but I have a role in this movie, and it's actually really exciting. It's called Band Boy. And I'm showing, kind of, if viewers are looking, I don't know if you're listening, but it's really cool, because it's about Sandy's experiences. It's based very loosely, it's a comedy, on his experiences in bands and as a musician and songwriter in the 80s and 90s in New York, which he did. I mean, he was full-time sort of traveling with his bands, like on the road, trying to make it big in music. And the film features, it's a musical. It's a real, like, musical, classic kind of movie musical. And it has this wonderful sense of whimsy and comedy, like you saw when you did Berserkers, Benita. But it also features his amazing hit pop songs, and And so the role I play is, I guess this reveals now the age I am in my life now as an actor, but I play the mother of the young musician. But it's really, really fun. And it's unexpected. It's sort of, I want to say it's a little cross between like, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, how it's like, it's a musical, but it's like also this communal fun feeling in the
I
audience.
believe there's a website for that, right? Isn't there? So that
Yes, yep. Yeah, thank you, Benita. Yeah, the way folks can look it up, and it's the big Albany premiere is just Sunday, June 25th at the Madison, which is super exciting too. I love the Madison.
yeah.
So you could like be at your local theater in Albany, Sunday, June 25th. The best way to look it up is go to the Facebook page and that has an event page, Band Boy Albany or Band Boy at the Madison, one or more of those. Or you could look it up, Sandy McKnight, Band Boy Albany, all different ways you'll find it by Googling.
Lee, we've always got, and we ate into a little time, but Ellen's got a couple of very specific questions for you.
That's right. This is our close-up segment that we end up our episodes with our guests. Just some rapid-fire questions about you. So, Liv, are you ready for your close-up?
I hope so. I'll try to be brief, which is not my forte, as you can see. Sorry.
So, what is the moment in your life where you just knew I have to do theater?
Wow. You know what? I just remember. I think I've pinpointed it. It was when I was in high school, and I wrote the first play I ever wrote just on my own on a typewriter, a Brother typewriter. I remember at my house, and I brought it in the little copy, the one paper copy I had of it, into my theater department in my high school, and I just announced I would like to do that. I would like us to produce this play that I wrote. And then fortunately, this woman who directed the program read it and she was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then I lost it. I had that one copy and I lost it. And I remember my heart, my mom helped me. We ripped through the whole house trying to find the script. Cause back then, if you didn't have the one copy, that's it. Right. And I just remember that feeling of like, this is so exciting to me. Like nothing was more exciting than that I wrote this thing and I had this story and I got to direct it. And I was in, it was like this exciting thing that we saw and I shared with an audience after I found the script, which helped.
Is there a certain play that either you read or saw or were involved with that had a really big impact on your life?
Oh, these are such hard questions. There's so many. I think, I would have to say so much of Sondheim's work, it's hard to pick one, but
okay, we love you even more. No.
yeah, I'm like rifling through. Sweeney is so amazing for its theatricality and humor and the way, as you can see, there's that real historical story, but it's so farcical. It's both serious and farcical. And the message is very real about these real people who are really isolated and really lonely. So, and the music's amazing. So there's so many. That's just one example, Ellen. I know this is a rapid fire, so I guess I'll stick with that.
Just for fun, is there a time where you saw something or were in a show where there was just a big, oops, a little blooper that happened on stage? We love blooper stories.
Oh yeah. God, there's so many. Yeah. There've been so many moments where I couldn't, like, I forgot where I was supposed to move the chair or whatever, and I just did something. I'm trying to think of like a particular one. And there's been so many, Ellen. I can't, they're all like rapidly filling my brain. Suffice to say, I've had many. The bloopers are always the most fun though. We always go, it's live theater. Anything can happen. Oh, I just remembered a good one. Okay. We were doing Berserkshire. Then it was called Saturday Night Live. And we were doing it at a church for a benefit for them, like in their, sanctuary. Right. So picture it's the church with the stained glass in the evening. And there was a storm and the lights went out, all the electricity went out. And we quickly, just with their help, rigged up candles. Of course, they're all over as church, and we rigged them up and they became footlights, literal footlights. And we continued the show, which was a comedy show, in this sanctuary by Footlight. That was our light. Isn't that an amazing story?
Wow. That's awesome.
So we turned disaster into fun, I guess.
The show must go on.
Theater.
Right. It's live theater.
Oh, that's amazing. And just for interest of time, I think we'll wrap it there. But please remind us, Liv, about the film premiere again.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ellen. Yep. It's Sunday, June 25th at 7 p.m. at the Madison in Albany. And it's a film called Band Boy by Sandy McKnight. And that's the premiere screening. And
you star.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but thank you, Benita. I would not. Yeah, I have a great time being in it. And Wanda Houston, local legend, has a huge role, and many Albany area actors. Mark A. Contento is the young lead in musician songwriter. It's just such a wonderful show, and you come out and support the local talent. Albany and Berkshire region talent, and Sandy's original writing and directing, and I swear you're going to have a great time. It's fun. The music's fantastic. And look it up. Band Boy Albany, Sandy McKnight.
Liv, we're going to look for your shows as well. And if anybody's looking to celebrate women and you've got a slot for a show that's got a point of view and some humor as well, get a hold of Liv Cummins. She's got it for you.
Thank you, Benita and Ellen. And I wanted you to both to know you'd be happy how much water I've been drinking during this podcast.
For me, it's coffee. But Liv, thank you. All best. Break legs. Can't wait to hear about whatever else is coming up on your docket.
Thank you both so much, Benita, Ellen. It's been a real joy. I'm really excited to be here with you.
And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.